Welcome, everybody, to the Joy Spot. If you are watching live with us today, say hello in the comments. Let me know where you are tuning in from. I am so excited about today's show. I'm going to introduce our guest in just a minute, but if this is your first time joining the Joy Spot, my name is Sherry Elise, and I am your host. And the Joy Spot is a talk show that really explores how people connect to their joy and all the different ways, and then also how we celebrate it. So let us talk a little bit about today's guest. I have different people on all the time, whether it's authors, thought leaders, all of the things. And the most important thing for me about our guests is that they exude joy in the work that they do. And this guest is no different. Let me read a little bit about Dave Noll. Dave Noll is a TV mastermind. Dave is a two-time Emmy Award winner, two-time Gracie Award winner, and he has won the coveted James Beard Award for the best television series, Chopped. What's in the mystery box? Tissues. Now, Dave is the author of the new book, The Visionary in Charge: 7 Simple Rules, because just one extraordinary idea can change your life. Filled with inspiration, insightful stories, and all the experience and takeaways from his enormous success in creating content. Dave is also a fiery and enlightening keynote speaker whose unique look at the business world, light up the room storytelling, and tangible practical tips have thrilled audiences from LA to Miami to New York, all places I've lived. Dave has created over 60 plus television series, over 3,500 episodes, over $500 million in television sales. You know, the networks love him. And Chopped was inducted into the Culinary Hall of Fame. Plus, he's won the Platinum Album Award from the Recording Industry Association for his work on the soundtrack to the Titanic. Yes, Dave is here with us today. Please welcome to the Joy Spot, Dave Noll.
That guy sounds great.
Right? You're like, who's she talking about?
Sounds fun.
Yes, totally. Well, that's why I asked you here. Welcome. Thank you so much for saying yes to being here.
Thank you so much. I have watched your show before, as you know, and I don't know how we met. I think on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I probably stalked you.
Yeah, or we came across each other on Facebook. But it's really nice of you to invite me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Like I said, starting that, there's a lot of successful people out there. There's a lot of thought leaders, a lot of people that are really changing the world with the content that they do and making a mark in the world. And while I admire that and respect that and want to learn from that, what really hits home is, and why I was attracted to asking you on the show and first went to you on LinkedIn, was because of the joy that just filled your posts. And I'll just say this outright, Dave, you are a great success in business, but I also feel like you're a great human too.
I tried very hard.
Yeah.
Business is hard and creating TV shows is hard. And I've been married 27 years. I have 3 daughters. Raising kids is hard sometimes, although it is the great joy of my life. But all of those things sometimes get obviously overwhelming. More than anything else, that's the word I find myself using. It's like, it's just all too much sometimes. But what I try to do is, maintain joy every moment that I can.
Right. And I mean, let's be real here. I mean, it's not, as you said, like life happens, you have all the things. It's not something that we can be every second, but to make a concerted effort or try it.
I find coffee helps a lot.
I literally have that written here. What else motivates you besides coffee like it does me?
I love movies. I love coffee.
Yeah.
You can see I'm a Disney
Same.
fan. But really I'm a Disney fan, and I think a specific way. I love the parks, I love the movies, I love the whole thing. But I really, more than anything, love the idea that one small thing that sparks joy can turn into a massive billion-dollar business. And that's what happened with Walt, right? He created Mickey on a Train at one of the worst, if not the worst, but one of the worst points of his entire career. His prized possession at that point was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. It was stolen from him. And at a very low point in his career, he was on a train with his wife and started sketching Mickey Mouse. And he was calling it Mortimer, as the story goes. And his wife was like, Mortimer is, you know, it sounds a little too serious. Sounds like a banker. What about Mickey Mouse? And that just, again, that one character, that one spark of joy, that one piece of content, right? That can light up a theater at that point. Those shorts just lit up every single theater. Can then turn into this multi-billion-dollar business. That's amazing, and I love that. I try to remind myself of that every day.
Yeah, and I love that story because just knowing about, well, having the connection to joy and being mindful of it, I think that's what stands out. Like I said, you know, you don't only create successful television shows with your partner Cleve, but you also have made the choice to share what you've learned, and not everybody does that. And so I just want to give you kudos for that as well, for sharing the things you learn.
There was one point where I thought maybe I want to write a book, and I wrote down all these notes and filled up all these colorful note cards, big multicolored note cards. And then it was like, this is really hard. Getting an agent and it was so hard. And so I just decided, you know what I'm going to do is go on LinkedIn and just share little bits, little stories from the book every day. Any knowledge I've ever had. Whenever I don't know what to write about, I'm just like, okay, well, what's the smartest thing I've ever learned? Write about that. And so that, you know, I don't know, it took off. I went from 500 connections, and now I'm not up to 20,000 yet, but I'm trying to get there. What the amazing thing though for me is then a publisher reached out and said, oh, you should write a book. And I was like, yes, full circle. It worked.
And what happened?
First of all, beautiful. It's the same color as your book, so you know we're on the same wavelength.
Yep. About the same thing.
It's called The Visionary in Charge, and it's about how one simple, extraordinary idea can change your life. So I give 7 steps on how to create ideas and how to bring them to life.
I love it. And let me ask you this one question. What has been the one extraordinary idea that has changed your life?
Well, the big one obviously was Chopped, where if we didn't come up with that show, I don't know if I'd still be creating shows. It wasn't the first idea we came up with. Obviously, it was, it was pitch number 870 something. So that's
okay. Can you just say that again for people? Like, that's not something to just,
So when we started very early on, when you create TV shows and you pitch TV shows, there's so much rejection, right? That's what it's all about. It's the same thing as being an actor, an actress, a host, a songwriter, a writer, any creative. Most of your career really is about rejection. I jokingly say 99% of everything I do, no one will ever see, but it's not really a joke. That's kind of true. That's really what happened. So as we were pitching, and you start to get kind of like overwhelmingly depressed about the rejection, my crazy math brain.
What's in the box? Depression.
My crazy brain was like, well, if you come up with an equation, that might help. And it was weird. That's a weird thought. But I was reading Brandon Tartikoff's book, which is amazing. And if anyone, cares about TV, loves TV, or wants to work in TV or anything, you should read Tartikoff's book. And in there, it says even the best show ever, you're going to have to pitch 30 times in order to get a deal. And so I had that number and I put it on our big whiteboard back when I had this giant development room in Manhattan. And then I went to all these production companies and networks and I said, of every deal, how many deals do you need to get a show on the air? And the answer was 4. And then I said, of every show on the air, how many shows do you need to get a hit? And it was 8. So the math works out, I think, to 960. So we knew, all right, we're going to have to pitch 960 times in order to get a legitimate hit. And Chopped. So we had other shows that lasted. One of my favorite shows of all time was a show called Don't Sweat It. It was a building show on HGTV, and we renovated people's homes. It was a heck of a lot of work, but the amount of happiness and joy we brought to these people. We went in and in 48 hours knocked walls down and renovated kitchens and, turned a tiny little room into a big living room or a tiny little room into a big office or whatever. And that show was amazing. But the show that really changed everything was Chopped. That premiered in 2009 and it's still on. And it has crossed across the franchise. It's crossed 950 episodes. It'll either be this year or early next year where it crosses 1,000. And that's just unbelievable. Amazing.
It's amazing. Yeah. Can I just take you back? Can we go back a little bit? Was creating television always your dream? Like how did that little journey go?
It's interesting because no, like you just don't know that that's even a thing. Obviously I didn't know that was a thing. But when I was young, my mom loves pointing out, I watched a ton of TV, but I did this weird thing. I would create a lot of lists. I would list out the highest rated shows. I would list out the lowest rated shows. Every fall, I would create my grid. Here's how I would program ABC or NBC or Fox. And I had
That's not average, by the way. The average person doesn't do that.
Yeah, I had all these bonkers lists. When I was in middle school, there was a point during the day at school where a bunch of us didn't have anything to do. So we kind of had a fake study hall. It was a study hall with no teacher. So randomly, I created this game called Top 10 TV based on the purple section of the USA Today, because every Wednesday they listed the top shows. So it would be teams of 2 roughly. I totally had forgotten about this show. It's because it wasn't a show. It was just a live event.
It sounds like a show. I'm like,
every week I would host this live event for weeks and weeks and weeks. I mean, it went on forever. Where it was 2 teams and they would have to, I would say, all right, let's take, and I would give the answer to one person. And, so this is number 30. And they would have to describe that show to their partner and the partner would have to guess without saying the title. And it built to this bonus round where the winning team, where I gave the clues and they were shows from all over the map, or maybe anyway. And they tried to win and I would buy candy bars and they would try to win candy bars.
Hey, so whatever works.
Thing. I read at one point that if you really want to find what is the perfect gig for you, the perfect career, one way to do it is to go back to when you were 10, 11, 12 years old, before all the walls were put up, before you didn't know better. What did you do then? And I had never put all this together. I just thought, oh, that was an interesting thing. But when America Says came out, so America Says is our game show that has now crossed 500 episodes. It is the biggest show in the history of the Game Show Network. I love saying that. It's amazing.
Good. Celebrate it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My friend Adrian, who was in middle school with me, reached out over Facebook and he was like, oh my gosh, I just watched America Says. It's unbelievable. Huge congratulations. You should bring back Top 10 TV. And I was like, I had literally forgotten and had never put it together that, oh my gosh, I've been creating shows since I was, and it was literally a game show. We played it out just like a game show. there was a bunch of people there, I would say, all right, everybody, welcome to Top 10 TV. Our contestants today are Adrian Scott from wherever he was from. And, James Fawcett, Jason Shaw. And so it was all of our friends would play this game. And now here I am, and I've actually created a bunch of game shows, but one that's an actual hit game show now.
Speaking of game shows, look at the comment we have from...
the king. I mean, literally. And this is, I'll tell you this, one of the most wonderful things in show business, in TV, is being able to meet the giants, I was able to work with Celine Dion. I worked with Tom Cruise at one point. I worked with Adam Sandler. I've worked with Drew Barrymore, Vivica Fox. I mean, if you love Chopped, Ted Allen is unbelievable. All those judges, amazing. John Michael Higgins on America Says is an absolute genius. But I have also been able to meet and become friends with game show legend Bob Bowden, who ran the Game Show Network at one point. And it's people like that who are extremely knowledgeable and just also really, really good people.
Yeah.
And I always say it's really hard to find anyone who hits the trifecta. They're talented in some way. They actually work hard, and they're actually a good person. And Bob Bowden is a fantastic example of, he's just one of the most talented people in the history of game shows.
I love that.
Extremely hardworking, always has been, and just the nicest person, ever.
Bob and I we did TEDx talk together at Syracuse.
And Bob is texting me. He said also throw in that he's crazy handsome too. So sure, I'll say it.
Yes. That was the first thing I noticed about him. I was like, this is a crazy handsome man. We even had coffee and breakfast together at a Jewish deli out here in LA.
Wow.
Yes.
Bob.
So let's talk about, because as you said, the TV industry is notorious for, well, we mentioned this beforehand. We talked about, it's not always the nicest industry, but also like just on ourselves, and all of you mentioned how many times you had to pitch. And so the rejections that you get over and over and over again. How does one, I say, I'm a former actress, I got it too, but how do you show up consistently?
You literally have to bulldoze past it. And again, this is something that I didn't even realize I was doing, but writing the book and writing all these colored note cards that became the book, you realize a lot of what you're doing is coming up with ways to get past rejection and the feeling of failure. When we're kids, we're taught, and it makes sense when you're a kid, that the F is horrible, right? The F is horrible when you get it. You get an A, that's great. You get a B, I was like thrilled. A C, you were like, huh. But when you got that F, it was horrible.
Yeah.
And hide this from your parents. Make sure to throw it out. Like do everything you can to avoid that F. And what happens as we get older, as we become adults, is you equate that with little things. Like if you're an actress and you try out for a part, and you don't get it, you think that same thing, F, failure. And so one of the chapters of my book is there is no fear and there is no failure, because you literally have to bulldoze through it. You cannot think of it in that way. So I created the equation. It wasn't failure then, right? Every rejection was merely a step forward towards 960. That was it. And so every time someone would say, we're passing on a show, I'd be like, oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Even if the pass was mean, even if it was dismissive, degrading, whatever it was a pass, and it was one more step on the way to 960. And by the way, if you're playing along at home, Chopped, as I say, was around pitch number 874 or something. So it was almost exactly right. Like as I say, we had other shows that made it, but the big hit show was, that equation was dead on.
I think about that, and it almost disconnects you, like having that equation, it disconnects you from the personalization of that and being like, okay, here, I just keep going and you just keep showing up again and again and again. So you get closer to that. It really feels like a trick or a tip to success.
There's so many like, the other thing I do is I keep Mickey Mouse around me. He's behind me as well. I have a enormous, one of the original maps of Disneyland. It's gigantic.
Uh-huh.
On the stairway up to my attic, just to remind, up to my office, which is on the third floor, just to remind me of, as I say, that creativity can be so wonderful and create so much wonder and joy and success and money. And it's all there to get me past those moments where you're like, oh my God, I can't do this again. I can't do it. It's too much.
I'm done. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
What,
I'm
curious, yeah, what, has there been any of your shows that have been a surprise to you, or like ones that you thought would be successful that weren't, or the other way around?
I would say everything is a shock. And that's the weird, crazy thing about television. I constantly feel every day like we're in Vegas. And it really is very similar TV, especially what we do, which is unscripted shows. So things like Chopped or America Says, or Our Goal every day. These are not our shows. I wish they were, but our goal every day is to come up with the next Survivor, Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, Shark Tank, Bachelor, Voice, America's Got Talent. That's our goal every single day. And so I picture that we're kind of in Vegas, where there's lots of lights and lots of fun and lots of yelling and lots of anger and lots of money at stake. And you're pushing all your chips in every day on this new show, knowing that every day you're going to lose. Like the house is going to win. And then every once in a while you get that. 2 weeks ago, we got a call on Tuesday. A buyer wanted a show, and it came in at like 3:00 in the afternoon. And I often, when I can, I'm just like, that's it for the day. It's good. It can only go downhill from here.
Checking out.
What? And then I don't know if this has ever happened. The next day, a different buyer called, and they were picking up deals for 2 other shows. So we sold 3 shows in 2 days.
Wow.
That never happens. Now, look, the odds are, right? I told you the odds before, not necessarily that any of them are actually going to make it to air. Maybe 1 out of the 3. But just getting a deal is so hard that when it happens, you have to be like, bam, celebrate. It's so difficult. But they're all miracles. I used to say for years and years and years and years, any hit TV show was a miracle. Now, just in the last 5 or 6 years, what I say is, what I've realized now that I've talked to other producers, writers, actors, people who have successful shows, every hit TV show is at least 3 miracles. It's not just one. A 1 miracle might get you on the air, but to actually be a hit show, you need at least 3 miracles. It's that crazy and that hard.
Well, the thing that I would say not that I know all of, well, I'm going to ask you what you think is the secret to your success, but I would say the first thing as I'm listening to you talk is that you actually went for it, because I think so many people keep that idea in their head and they have this big dream, but they let all of the thoughts and all of the things stop them from doing that.
It's like anything. I out of college, I got a job at MTV Networks. I was an intern. I moved up, so I worked for nothing. And I was the rare intern that literally loved it, that I wasn't there. A lot of people get into TV for weird reasons. They can't do anything else. They're kind of lazy. There are a lot of people that are just really good looking, and they're like, well, I should be on TV. I should work in TV because I'm so adorable. I didn't have any of those things. So I just worked hard, and I got a PA job, production assistant, associate producer. You move up, segment producer. And eventually I was a what about this person. So even when I was a segment producer, I kept saying, what about this? Have we ever done it this way before? What about it? And then when you get to shows, I would say, oh, what about this show? What about this show? And that worked. And I got a couple shows on the air. I got a bunch of specials, a couple series on the air. And eventually my boss, Bill Brand, called me into his office one day and said, "Hey, I want to teach you something. What you're doing is not really how it's done. You're not supposed to be the internal person who comes up with ideas. That really won't benefit you. You might, you know, get a raise, but this is not where you should be. You should be on the outside pitching. That's how it works." And that's kind of the first time I really got it. And it's funny because I literally went home and I said to my wife, "You know Bill Brandt, he's great." Bill Brandt was freaking great. It was one
Mhm.
of the best bosses you could have, especially at that point in my career where I'm starting off. The guy was a genius on so many levels. Um, and I said to her, "Look, I think I trust Bill Brand. Either he's giving me what will become maybe the most valuable advice of my life, or he's trying to get rid of me, and he's done it in a genius, crafty way." And my wife, God bless her, said, "I think he is trying to tell you something, and I don't think he's trying to fire you. I think it's real." And so I left VH1 and started creating shows. And as I say though, it's so much about thrusting yourself into it, giving. I mean, it takes so much energy that there's really you don't have any left, and then you need to summon it again, thanks to
Yeah.
cup of coffee number 3, and thrust yourself into it again the next day, and thrust yourself into it. But I kind of feel like that's what songwriters do, and that's what painters do, and um, that's what anyone who wants to get their creative vision out there. Hence the book title, "The Visionary in Charge." Anyone who wants to create something and bring it to life, it takes a what I called it the other day, a superhuman level of optimism. Um,
Yes.
it just it's and you just have to be kind of a little bit of a crazy person.
And I think, like you said, that disconnection from take that personalization again of it. I think that that is so important because it's not just people in the creative field, it's anybody that has a big dream, whether it's their own business or anything. And
Any entrepreneur, it's the
yeah,
same thing. I
exactly.
think it helps in show business that I'm just a dad, like from the suburbs. I'm literally like, you know, I, I meet people who are amazing and great and fabulous, and they go to amazing parties and events. I am not that. I go and pick up my kid from school. That's all I do.
Yeah. So Jim's here and he says, I think he was talking about when you were talking about the pitching. He says when they actually tell you they pass, it's helpful, but from time to time you think you had a good pitch meeting and then they just don't tell you yes or no and just leave you hanging.
Oh
That's
my
tough.
gosh, Jim. I write about this in the book, and you will read it and cry for me because there are heartbreaking stories. And I say one of the worst was, and this is true, an executive called up and was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are so talented. We're looking for these very specific things right now. We have money. We're ready." And so Cleve and I very quickly, and he's like, "Look, we want just all of your best ideas given these parameters." And he had very specific parameters. So Cleve and I worked round the clock days over through the weekend. We had, I mean, probably 50 or 60 shows that we were thinking of pitching. Finally whittled it down to 6. Luckily, Cleve, by the way, is such a genius. She is I call her a popcorn popper, bam, 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 a fireworks display of ideas. She is that amazing.
That's
Um,
his writing partner for those of you who don't know. Yeah.
we create
Not
shows.
writing, create
Cleve and I
shows. Sorry.
create shows together.
Yes, that's what I meant.
And so then we agreed on 6. We moved. We Cleve and I were like, these are the 6. And then I worked crazy hard again into the night. Woke up early the next day, crafting these amazing blurbs about each show because that's what he wanted with bullet points. And it was this amazing email of creativity and joy and love, and if you saw the email and you knew the parameters and you had created television before, you would know, oh, these people poured their soul into this. And he never got back. Like literally never got back, to the point where we had to go to the agent and say, "We sent this thing, can you please just..." And then eventually he said to the agent, like, "Oh yeah, I was wrong. We don't need shows right now." So but when Jim says, sometimes you don't even know, that exactly is true. And again, you feel failure instantly, right? You feel like, oh my gosh, that was a waste of time. And that thing comes in from inside of you as when you were a kid going, you didn't capture their attention. You didn't win here. You lost. You were a loser. And you have to immediately fight that. And so as I say, we've come up with these ways like, oh, that was to me, that's 6 amazing pitches. That's 6 steps towards 960. So we're that much closer. Thank you, TV executive who I will not name. You just got us 6 steps closer.
Mm. Well, what about the people? So let's talk about one of your rules in your book, because I know there's 7 of them. Let's talk about, because I know
Each
this
one
one
more
was,
genius than the next.
I know. And I'm just going to say this, everyone. Normally people are used to, I do a 30-minute show, but I had already asked Dave beforehand because I knew that I had so many questions. So we're going a little over. So, and that's still okay with you, right? From when I
Yes.
first asked you. Okay. So let's talk about fear, because I know that that is what is holding so many people back. And I know in your book, you talk about rule 5.
And that, like, that is my thing. Like, when it comes to business, you can't have fear. If you, as soon as you do, you lose. That's kind of that's my thought. My favorite story about this is, which is ironic, obviously, because it's about fear. My favorite story is about Stephen King. He writes about this. He's talked about this when he was young, very young. He used to read all these magazines, obviously, that were full of short stories. And one day he realized they take submissions. And the kid was like, oh my gosh, all of these publications that I love actually take submissions. And they don't know that I'm only 11 or 13 or whatever he was. I'm going to submit. So he started submitting. And he talks about the first rejection letter that he ever got. And, he poured his heart into this story. It was the greatest story he had written at that point. He thought it was brilliant. Other people had said to him, this is brilliant. And here is this rejection letter. And it's, he says it probably even was just a form letter, honestly. Maybe even no one even read it. And so you picture an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old pouring their soul into this and getting rejected so coldly. And what would most people do? What would their reaction be? Young Stephen King's reaction was he was thrilled. He couldn't believe that his favorite publication actually wrote him back. He couldn't believe that he actually had gotten a real rejection from a real magazine that he loved. And so above his bed, there were eaves, much like above my head now. And he banged a nail and then he put the rejection, and he said it was the first thing I saw in the morning and the last thing I saw at night. And it reminded him that's the goal. Rejection is the goal, because he just knew, well, if I just keep submitting, I would eventually, and he didn't care. It was like 80, 90 rejections. Eventually, someone's going to say yes. And wouldn't that be amazing? And so that's what he did. He kept submitting to where the nail wasn't big enough. And so he had to put a spike, a wooden stake into the eaves. And that amount of joy is what I try to do every day. So you try to knock through. There is no fear. I don't care if people are going to pass on the show now. That's at least what I say out loud.
Hey, if it gets you through the day.
Exactly. And you just have to know that's those are the steps forward. You need those 90 rejection letters or whatever, to get the one story. And so that's how I don't see fear anymore.
Well, speaking of fear, so Eric's asking, do you ever fear that this free advice and ideas to these execs who don't get back anyone are secretly trying to get some ideas that they could take credit for?
Well, I get all the time, how do you protect your ideas? That's another one that you can't do. In TV, In the scripted world, everything is very well documented, and they have a large union which takes care of them. And nothing can be stolen, nothing can happen to you. I'm sure writers would say otherwise, but um, you have a union, you have laws in place. In the unscripted world, if you're creating a game show or a competition show, if you're creating Chop, something like that, there's really nothing to protect you, except what I've heard is, well, if you have an agent, no one wants to mess with CAA or WME or the big agencies. Um, but so Eric, that is an excellent question. And, I could do 6 hours on times where it certainly appeared as if an idea had been stolen. Or there was one time where I pitched a show. This was ages ago. I pitched a show. They were like, "Oh my gosh, we're so into this," and then it was announced. They passed, and then it was announced like 6 months later. A very, very similar show, and so it felt very weird. And then what happened was, I was with that same executive. I was at a party, which this is why I probably don't go to parties anymore. I was at a
I just
party.
don't go because I fall asleep.
Yeah.
I'm always running.
And
Too late.
she had been drinking, and she got very serious, and she apologized for something I didn't realize she had done. And she said, "Yeah, I stole that idea from you, and I gave it to a friend of mine, another production company." And I literally didn't know. I was so shocked that actually happened and people would actually do that, and so shocked that she was admitting it. And so there's nothing you can do, is the answer. You just gotta have so many ideas that you don't care. And again, when I say there is no fear and there is no failure, fear would stop you from doing what I do. If you had any fear at all, and some would say if you had any sense at all, you wouldn't do it. So you just can't. You just got to keep going and say, well,
it sounds like you have to be like so connected to your why, like so connected to why it is that you're doing and your passion and your joy to continually show up every day for it. Otherwise, I think that's why so many people just stop.
And really, what I'm so good at now is celebrating every win, but I'm also good at celebrating every moment. Like I am, if there's one regret, people are like, well, what's your biggest regret? And they don't believe this, but one of my very biggest regrets is not taking enough pictures early on. I had such a crazy, cool, weird, awesome career, like from 97 until, I don't know, I didn't start taking pictures until like 2015, and it's crazy. Like it's too bad. It's really weird. Now I take pictures of everything. I don't want to miss any of it.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to look back and go, oh, that was really cool.
I love that. And I think that's such a great message. We're rounding up in a few minutes, but I think that's such a powerful message to leave people. Is about the celebration of life. It's about being present in the moment and taking it all in. Because would you agree that, as we go from one achievement to the next, it's just like, okay, what's next? And you forget to actually be here with it.
There are weeks that we have where it's pitch after pitch after pitch, or you're editing something, or you're on a shoot. There's tons of times where we're on a shoot and then you're running down the hallway to get on a Zoom to pitch, or you're on a shoot in LA and you're leaving the shoot to go pitch. And all of those things, we had a show that shot on the Paramount lot for 300 plus episodes. And luckily that was in the time period where I started taking pictures. And I was just like, I'm going to enjoy every freaking moment of this. Cause I'm a dude from Jersey. Like I'm a dad from Jersey just getting on the Paramount lot is amazing. Like pitching on the Universal lot to me is unbelievable. Pitching on the Disney lot is amazing. Pitching ABC or the Disney Channel or now Disney Plus. I always schedule so that, usually when you're scheduling pitches live in LA, you want to pack as many in as you can, right? So it's like every other hour you're scheduling a pitch. When I'm on the Disney lot, I have like 2 hours after the pitch just so I can walk around the studio and pretend I work. Yeah, like it's amazing. I take a lot of pictures.
I did that recently. So I was in DC doing a TV segment, and I, because, I want television host, as I'm doing right
Yep,
now, but in a bigger field is the dream. So as I was on as the guest, I was just imagining this, taking it all in, going, this is my set, this is my studio. It's that whole visualization of that as well.
absolutely.
What would you say is, uh, what would you say is your do you have a practice actually? Do you have a daily practice to stay connected to the present, to stay connected to your joy, all of that?
One of the things I try to do every day is write, and and this I don't even like talking about it because it sounds so foo foo or whatever. I don't know,
I don't
but I
know.
try
Do you know who
to
you're talking to?
You're right.
There's
For the
nothing to
joy. Yes. Um, so every day I write down one thing that I should accomplish. That's the most important thing of the day, and that is literally just because my list of things to do is so big every day. Just because there's so many things Cleve and I want to do. There's so many people we want to pitch to. There's so many shows we want to create. There's too much. We could never do it all if we wanted to. So I focus on at least one thing, sometimes it's two, that I know I'm going to get done that day. Because what I would do is I would kind of feel depressed at the end of the week when there was like 15 things I didn't do.
You're
And I
back to your lists.
it as failure. And these, I'm a list person.
Mhm.
So what I was like, well, what if I just focus on, yes, there's that list, and yes, I'm not going to finish it all, but there's one or two things today that I know I'm going to do, and that kind of makes me happy. And then the other thing I got in the habit of doing is writing down one thing that day that I'm crazy thankful for, because I really think it's all about being thankful. Like the miserable people, I think, in show business often are just people that aren't thankful for everything they have. There's a lot of quotes, a lot of people I've talked to over the years, a lot of people I've studied. Oprah obviously is huge. She's the master.
She
But
is.
Shonda Rhimes, Ryan Tedder talks about it. It's Celine. You have to remind yourself every day how lucky you are. Like I get to work in TV. Like I should, even on the worst day, even on the day where someone's being the meanest, even on the day the lady says, yes, I stole this thing that, and even on that day, you should be like, oh, I'm still in TV. Who cares?
So people often ask this question. They say, if you had a chance to talk to your younger self, what would you say? But I, I'd actually like to know the other way around. I would love to know, what would younger Dave tell this Dave right here
I
and
think about
now?
this a lot, actually. Writing the book, there's a couple times where I got, like anybody, writer's block. Like, I can't write that section. What do I do? Brr. And one of the things that got me past it was I kept saying, I wrote on another colored note card, Dave 20/70. So when I got stuck, I would say to myself, all right, what would 20-year-old Dave say to write about? Or what would 70-year-old Dave say to write about? And that really helped. And honestly, at age 20, I mean, this is just the God's honest truth. Um, if you said, to Dave at age 20, what would you love? What would you want to do? He would say, I want to be married to Jen, which I am. I met her when I was 20. And I would want to have 3 daughters, which I do. And I would want to work in TV. So, and my favorite house was my grandparents' house growing up. And I bought it from my grandparents, and that's where we live. So it's pretty easy to, so 20-year-old Dave would, give me a high five.
You're just a dad in New Jersey. You're just a dad living with Jen, doing the TV thing. And I'm going to say, from the side over here of the person that knows a lot about joy, that it's been my life work, is really, that's what that looks like. That's what that feels like from you, is that awareness of that you're living the life that you have chosen, and continually choosing it every day.
And I will say, because the other thing I learned writing the book is that I wrote a whole bunch of it. And my publisher was like, this is great. You have such a unique voice, blah, blah, blah. You're so consistent. It was great. And then she started saying, she was really nice, but then she started essentially saying it doesn't seem real anymore. Once I had written like 100 pages, 150 pages, she started getting a little negative. And I was like, this is some of my greatest stuff. Like, this is stories about Disney and Celine and stories about me and Barry Diller and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm pouring my soul into this, lady. She was like, it's starting to not feel real. And then she called one day and she's like, look, I just reread the whole thing, everything I had written at that point. And she's like, you're not writing about the negative stuff at all. And I was like, well, of course not. That's, people don't want to read about that. They want to read the success. And she was like, that's not true. It doesn't, it will seem fake. And so I redid it all, and I went through and I added 3 or 4 of the most difficult times. And she was like, oh my gosh, that one thing, now that I really know you, I'm reading that and I'm tearing up. This is now a real book. And so I would say to anyone who just kind of looks at me and goes, well, it seems like you got every dream so I'm sure your life's easy. And I would say that, like, look, the reality is what we do is extremely hard. And, you could go a year without a sale. We've gone years without a new show on the air at different times. And there's a point where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to sell another show again. My wife is unbelievable. I've been married for 27 years, but marriage is hard, right? Like, there are times where that is difficult. There was one day I was kind of on top of the world. I was working for Barry Diller. We had just sold a whole bunch of shows. Barry Diller, billionaire, started the Fox network. Cleve and I were able to work with him for 4 years, 2009, 10, 11, 12. It was unbelievable. It was literally unbelievable. I write about that a lot in the book. But one day I'm in the middle of workshopping a game show that we later sold, and it made it to 80 episodes. And I'm workshopping a game show. I had 3 daughters. And that day I was on top of the world. And then my wife calls and says, you have to come home right now. And I was like, what? And she said, Sarah, our oldest daughter, it looks like she has type 1 diabetes. I had really no idea what that was. Scared. I mean, I was essentially scared every day for the next 2 years.
Wow.
Easily. I really thought, oh, I'm going to mess this up and she's 100% going to die. And eventually you kind of get through, and the whole time we're trying to sell shows and create things. And then I don't know how many years later, right about the time we kind of got a handle on it, our youngest daughter was diagnosed with it. And that sent me into another good year of being lost and sad or whatever. So that's when I say I've created these things to keep going and put them in the book, it's because life is hard. And I don't care who you are, whether you're Celine Dion, who I worked with a lot, and she really taught me about joy. You look at everything Celine's been through, so much joy and so much pain, no matter who you are. So I think it is very helpful to come up with these ways to remind yourself of everything you have. And that's so key.
Well, I was just going to ask you a question, but I think you might have answered it, which is really just your message. If you had 30 seconds they were given a mic to the world and they were all listening, what message would you want to leave?
That is it. The blessing, whether one believes in God or whatever religion you are or aren't, but the key to me is one has to remember every single day, no matter how hard it is the blessings that you have. That to me is what keeps me going in life and in business and vice versa.
That's it. You wrapped up my heart. You wrapped up my heart in that. Let everybody know how I have it on the screen, but let everybody know the best way to connect with you. Talk a little bit about the release of your book and how they can get it.
right now you can go on LinkedIn, and I think Sherry, you put it
I'm going to
on
put in the
that
comments.
you can reserve your copy. They're trying to decide now what the first run print number is. So everyone should go and reserve a copy. You don't have to pay anything right now. You just reserve 20, for crying out loud.
Yeah, why not?
But we don't have a date yet. It'll be soon. It's in the
Yeah.
next couple months. But LinkedIn is where I do most of my writing, most of my connecting with people. Everything I've ever learned, I try to put on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram at Dave Noll TV.
Dave, thank you for generously sharing everything that you've learned, every rejection that you've gotten, every time you've shown up, how we can succeed. And I mean that so genuinely. You know, there's people like myself who have big dreams as well and are showing up every day for them. And you are the reminder and the inspiration to just keep showing up.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching us. Share this with your friends. Grab Dave's book. Just put book in the comments, and then I'm going to give you the link so that you can reserve your very own copy. And Dave is amazing, and I'm just going to keep going, but I will end this here. Hope to see you all soon on the next Joy Spot. Thanks for joining us live. And Dave, thank you.